Hey guys, Discovery's Education and Entertainment here. I brought Tilly back today because we're going to talk about turtles. And to talk about turtles, I wanted to remind you of a couple of things about tortoises. Now, I've already done a small video on tortoises, so we'll just touch up on a couple of things and then we'll move right along to turtles. Basically, the red ear slider. Now, before I want to go on, I want to give a big shout out to Hager Elementary School. I went to their graduation. A lot of great kids there graduating into the middle school. So that was very fun to see. Now, if you remember, we talked about Tilly the tortoise. Okay, she's an African tortoise. She's a yellow-footed tortoise. You could tell by the feet. Now, the basic thing with tortoises is look at her feet. There's no webbing. Okay. There's also a big high carapace. The top is called a carapace. Bottom is called a plastron. That's called the plastron. Now, that's going to be the same thing with the red ear slider. Now, this tortoise is great at digging burrows. She has big, powerful claws here. All right. So, when we look at her and we look at the red ear slider, one thing you're going to notice is the red ear slider, if I could get him to come out of his shell. I just got him out today and he seems a little shy there. But the thing that you want to take a look at are the feet, if I'm able to get him to have the feet out. Let's get rocks out here. Okay. Now, if you notice, the carapace is real high. It's real big. And Tilly is actually a large tortoise. If she got into the water, boy, she would sink right down to the bottom, okay? She's an omnivore. She eats everything from greens to meat, so she is definitely an omnivore. Now, I'm going to put Tilly down here, and I am going to lift up rocks. It looks like he's not going to come out of his shell. Let's take a look at him inside of his shell, okay? Since how he's being so shy today. The way he goes into his shell is kind of like a protective mode, okay? You see he pulls his arms back inside of the shell and he kind of covers up. His head's in the shell. He just covers up so that he's able to protect himself. Now, if you look at the claws, he has long claws. And that's one of the things that tells me that this is a male. Okay. In between those claws, I don't know if we can see it unless he sticks his claws out, which I doubt it. Let me see if I can get him to do so. Come here, man. Okay. See that? There's webbing. Okay, let's try it again. There's webbing. Okay. Now, that's because Rox here is a red ear slider. He's semi-aquatic, which means that he can go from land to water. Okay. That's what semi-aquatic means. And what happens here is he's a lung breather. So he goes down into the water, he holds his breath, but then, when he needs to, he comes back up and he lays out on a log. Now, red ear sliders especially are ectotherms. Okay, we are endotherms. So we're able to keep our constant body temperature. They are not. Their body temperature relies on their outside surroundings. So, what happens? What happens in the winter? Where do these guys go? Well, scientists say that many of them will burrow and put themselves under leaf litter and try and control their temperature that way. But more and more scientists are saying that these guys have a special adaptation, okay? And that is called butt breathing. Okay, now I'm not the one that calls it that. Scientists are the one that calls it that. It's called cloacal respiration. That's the clinical term for this. Now, only only a handful of specialized animals actually do the cloacal respiration. Now, what that is when he goes under the pond, you're going to have that sheet of ice on top, okay? And this is the way it was explained by scientists. The way it's explained by scientists is they slow down their metabolism. They don't quite go into an hibernation. They go into like a brumation. Um, Maybe there's a better word for that. I don't know. But what they do is they slow down their body, and their body doesn't use as much oxygen as they normally would. Now, they're not able to breathe through their lungs at this time, okay, because they're underwater. So what happens is on the cloaca, which with reptiles the cloaca is the only hole back there. Okay, that's where they pee, poop, and everything from. All right. Humans, they have holes everywhere, including the pie hole. Okay, but with reptiles, one hole for all types of elimination. So that is the cloaca. Now, what they do is the water secretes or goes into the cloaca, and there is a sac, okay, called a base sac, and that sac is lined with blood vessels and stuff that can actually use the oxygen in the water. Now, the water itself at the bottom is not that cold at the bottom of the pond. The water on top of the water is cold enough to freeze, but it stays more neutral the deeper that you go. It stays neutral most of the year. So they can actually, scientists say they can actually survive through 5, 6, 7 months of cold and winter. And then what you will see is you will see a bunch of these guys come out. They will sit on top of the logs. Their whole bodies ache from lack of oxygen, okay? Acid buildup. And what they do is they lay out in the sun and they get warmed up. And now the sliders, this is a red ear slider. Red ear sliders get their name from number one, the head, okay? And he's going to keep his head in there, okay? I guess he's not going to come out. But he has red right over his ear, okay? He don't have an outer ear like we have. He has an inner ear. And what happens, he has a red like mark right over that ear section going across both sides of the face. That's why they call them red ear sliders. Now, the slider part comes from if you ever walk down into a pond or something and all of a sudden you hear things hitting the water. That's turtles, okay? Turtles will slide right down the log, right into the water, and they will disappear once they see you coming. Okay, so that's why they call this a red ear slider. Now, again, with turtles and tortoises, most of the time you can tell the difference between a boy and girl by their cloaca, number one. Number two, by their plastron. The bottom is called plastron. And a lot of the males, even though it's only a slight indentation, it's a little indentation. And that is so there's a female, when there's a female, they can rest on top of the female, and that's how they mate. Now, another way to tell a boy from a girl is the tail. He has a big tail. He's not going to let me pull it out, but his tail comes out about that far. The males have big, fat tails, okay? And the cloaca will actually be out here. It'll be about an inch or so past the carapace. Now, if it's female, it'll be right at this carapace line, okay? It don't go out very far at all. Now, these guys mainly breathe through their lungs, but they do have that special adaptation where they can breathe underwater. It's also said that in their throat they can also soak up some of that oxygen, kind of like a fish, but a fish uses gills. Very few animals have these types of adaptations, and that's very special. Now, the red ear slider is like America's favorite pet. Okay, a lot of people get sliders, um, and they're really cool, especially the babies. Man, you go to feed them, they come up to the top, and they just get so excited. But guess what? These are also um, the most abused animals, and I don't mean the animals being abused, but they don't belong here. Um, they're only supposed to be in a small part of the country. I think it's around the Mississippi area. However, they're invaders now. There's so many of them out there, not just in the U.S., but in the world. So now they are considered the most invasive species, or at least in the top 100 of invasive species. Now, if you don't remember what invasive species is, that's a species that isn't supposed to be in a certain area, but is in a certain area now because people have let them go. Please, if you have animals, do not let them go. If they survive, they become invasive species, and that's not good for the species that are originally part of this area. Okay, so this is Rox, and he is a red ear slider. See ya.